Welcome back. This is Exopolitics TV, and I'm Alfred Lambermont Weber. And today we have a very special guest who's come to us very well recommended, uh, Mr. Winston Shrout. Welcome, Winston.
Well, thank you very much. Is it okay if I call you Alfred?
Please do.
Okay. All right. With all that in mind, then we can move forward.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've had a conversation, and
Hmm.
and the topic that has brought us together is that of exoeconomics. You've been laboring in that field under the term exocommerce. And could you give us and our viewers just some background as to what you see as that term and what brought you to this understanding?
Well, sure. For a number of years, I've been kind of a boots on the ground kind of a guy. I was told a long time ago that I could either be a part of the problem or part of the solution. So I decided a long time ago that I'd be a part of the solution. And so what I've done is going with the some of the history and some of the technology and so forth that inadvertently or perhaps on purpose was created to create solutions in commerce with this in mind that one of the greatest deterrents to free will is debt. And so our main focus then with our solutions in commerce has been ways to resolve that debt to liberate people so they could obtain some level of higher consciousness so they could move in perhaps a little bit higher thought process. So that's what I've labored with for, wow, it's almost 9.5 years lecturing in that mode. And then what I wanted to do with the exo-commerce concept was to propose perhaps that we do have the technology, if properly applied, to have some sort of a relationship with those from other places, other planets, and so forth, because they simply don't do things the way we do things here. So that's what I've kind of labored toward, and that's the reason why I started the ExoCommerce website, was simply to reach out to that community who had worked in the world of extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or whatever. So that's kind of the direction I've gone.
Now, you mentioned in one of your lectures that's set out on your website, exocommerce.net, that you actually interact, for example, with an individual who is a Pleiadian and who is part of uh, Pleiadians or other extraterrestrials who actually live on this planet and who work and live among us. So
Yes.
you you're familiar with these with the milieu of extraterrestrials then.
Certainly, one of the things that listeners should observe is that there are many different Pleiadians. Now, when you use that term, that it implies where these people have come from, but not all of them have come from the exact same spot, and they don't necessarily all see eye to eye on all of the issues. Now, this one, the particular individual that I'm dealing with, obviously he's not an Earthman. There's I could give you several examples of that, but in any event, he's been here for a very long time. He told me that his family had been here on this planet for 13 generations, and he's been in many incarnations on this planet. And the interesting thing is that he can remember all of those incarnations and has carried all that information and knowledge forward. So that's a very interesting concept. And so he's very talented in scientific areas, in metallurgy. Wow, there's so many areas that he has expertise in that it's really interesting.
Right. Well, you've been using the term exocommerce. I've been using the term exoeconomics, and I think that they're just slightly different
Great, sure,
aspects of the same interest and of you know different ways of looking at these transactions. I'd like to
sure.
read a paragraph. It's a very short paragraph from a book by Bernard Lightower called Rethinking Money: How New Currencies Turn Scarcity into Prosperity. He writes, "It's time to rethink money." I find this sentence really interesting. Money is to humans what water is to fish.
Okay,
Humanity exists in an unrelenting flurry of monetary transactions that seem as natural and inscrutable to us as how one might imagine a fish to understand its aqueous environment. It's taken totally for granted. In the case of money, its dynamics and distinctions are obfuscated or forgotten over time, and further complicated by the fact that the professionals in the field, economists, actually never define what money is. They just describe what it does, how it plays the role of a unit of account, a store of value, a medium of exchange. At present, our unexamined money system perpetuates scarcity and breeds competition. Are you aware that money is created out of nothing as bank debt? And so, and it goes on. But I thought that the insight that money is to humans as water is to fish is really, really interesting. How do you, as a person who spent 13 years thinking about this, how do you react to that? What are your thoughts about that sentence?
Well, uh, uh, if you consider the level of understanding that caused that statement to be given, I would say probably it's high freshman, maybe sophomore level thinking.
Okay.
uh, One of the difficulties with money is that the creation of money, however it's created, and there's many types of money created in different ways and so forth. But when you say the word money, to me, the first word that pops into my mind is liability.
Ah,
Money as a medium of exchange creates a liability from the creator of the asset, and until that liability is redeemed, then's where we have the problem. Well, one of the first things that that you learn, or that I've learned, is that an unredeemable debt is not a valid debt. And so then when we start to examine money itself, then we have to determine, is the money we're talking about redeemable in something, or is it not? Now, one of the greatest
yeah,
problems.
yeah. Could I jump in there just because
Sure.
I'm kind of lost by
Okay.
unredeemable? Is that the same thing as what we call fiat money? That is just a
No,
oh
no. That's I'm talking about toxic derivatives.
you're talking about higher level
Yeah, I'm talking about maybe junior, senior level thought process here. Uh,
Okay. Well, let me that let me kind of back up then
okay,
again,
okay,
since
sure.
I I know that there's a huge amount of discussion on the airwaves, on the internet, in social
Oh yeah.
media, in your sphere, many others about the nature of money.
Uh-huh.
However, what really interests me and is because we're Exopolitics TV is the exo part, exo
Okay,
commerce,
sure.
and the exoeconomics, and just to kind of maybe if I could I take just a minute or two to set some context?
Well, you're in charge here. You do anything
No,
you
no,
want.
no, no, no. You are the guest, and I really don't want to interfere
Oh no, no.
with what you know, but I just want to set some context so that we can examine everything from an exo context. That is, if
Okay,
we pull back and we look at this planet from okay, this is a time space 3D planet that's been interfered with several predatory extraterrestrial species, out of which their the monetary system that we're operating under now developed. Okay, so that
okay,
the first one, and actually, thanks to Michael Tellinger in South Africa, we went to
sure. Yeah.
Adam's calendar
Uh-huh.
there, and the the first one was although we Homo sapiens, according to a reliable version, we were created as a 12-strand DNA light being in the third dimension, i.e., we could be on a planet where you don't need money. You're kind of operating at a different level. The the Anunnaki ETs landed on our planet about 280,000 years ago for the gold, and using advanced sound technology, devolved our ancestors back to a 3-strand DNA that is pushes down into the third density into time space,
Sure. Uh-huh.
and so as a slave being, and instituted all of the models, all of the hierarchical models that we have, the hierarchical monarchies, the religions, uh, human governance, and the duality based monetary systems, financial and monetary systems. All of that goes back to the Anunnaki, and then even through to the pharaohs, so that right now, what we see as the churches and the popes with their hats and the monarchs with their crowns and the presidents, with their regalia of office and
Yeah.
all of that, that's all they're all Anunnaki wannabes. That's all governance that comes down
Sure.
from them, and we're the dumbed down version of what we were designed at, and they set up this whole system of money. I like to call Earth the planet of money. In other words, it's a
Oh,
set up
okay.
prison system, and so starting from that screen, then that's how the exoeconomics of this planet started. We've got to go back 280,000 years where we had a predatory species intervene. And then what happened was that along another line of research, along about the beginning of the 20th century, we had a second predatory alliance intervene, namely the Draco Orion uh,
Yes. Uh-huh.
uh, uh, alliance intervene in terms of the Orion Greys. with the treaties that had to be renewed every 10 years for that allowed abductions in return for technology. And those treaties were signed both by the U.S. under the Roosevelt administration in the 30s and by the Nazi administration under Hitler. And
Yep.
then they were renewed and have been renewed every 10 years by the U.S. that some people call the Fourth Reich. So that some people call our current planetary system, monetary system, the Orion-based system, i.e., it's really designed to enslave the human race, going back to where you started, in the debt-based system, i.e., it was devised as a slave system. But from an exo point of view, we have to analyze and say, yeah, it goes back to where we had a planetary intervention by predatory species, and one of their modes was to introduce a monetary system as a prison system, so that if we go to Einstein's maxim that you can only solve a problem at the level, equal level or greater than it was introduced, the solution to this will be an exo solution. That is a multidimensional solution. So that's the method behind my bringing us into a dialogue about the exocommerce and the exoeconomics, and why I didn't want to get us into the box that so many people are in. Oh, sure, we can go to the Rothschilds, and we can go to 1913 and the bank panic of 1907, and how they did the false flag of the Titanic, and they got Woodrow Wilson and his affair.
Oh, I know
and
all
they
that.
got all the beast of the monster. What was it? Jekyll Island and all that bit. But rather we have to say, okay, how do we get into this mess? And it was at the exo level. Okay.
Yes.
So I am now going to turn it. I'm now going to turn it back over to you. Excuse the interruption. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's perhaps a few maxims, that are important to create, which I conceive of to be universal law. And one of those is that whoever creates the liability has to provide the remedy. And so when we talk about all these systems that have been, as it were, forced upon us, there has to be the remedy according to universal law, and the remedy is there. And so when we start to talk about the various systems and so forth, people should not become despondent in the belief, that they have no power in this system, because they do have the power, and the power is in the remedy which the law or what the system, whatever it is, provides. And so that's been one of the directions I've tried to take people in with these things we find ourselves with, is to go and discover the remedy, and that's the solution to the problem. And so when we start to talk about, the Orion system and the compounding interest and all those kind of things that were introduced at that point, there is a remedy for those things. Once you understand perhaps the difference between, principle, and you understand the difference between what we're calling fiat currency. There's a lot of misconceptions about those fiat currencies and so forth, which we could go into. But in any event, inadvertently, as I mentioned, or on purpose, if you go back to the Roosevelt days, when you start to study, and sometimes you have to look at some of these things from the left hand. I'm kind of a left-hand thinker in as much as I look at things differently than perhaps others wouldn't. And so sometimes you have to sort of detach yourself from the emotion that accompanies many of these problems and take a look at it from a different point of view. And when you do that, perhaps you will discover the remedy that was within the system that was proposed and so forth. So those things lie within, and they are available. And we have capitalized, as it were, upon those remedies and so forth. So that's what we have. So when we start to talk about economics, commerce, other places, and so forth and so on, there is a remedy, for the things that seem to be insurmountable. Does that help?
Yeah. So let's get into some of the remedies that
Okay.
you see and that you've studied and that you're in the process of developing and sharing.
Certainly. Uh, I probably one of the few people on the planet that perhaps has seen this. One of the problems we have is we get into a certain mode of thinking, and we rely upon that mode, and so we create a box for ourselves. And pardon me for saying it, but the patriot community has boxed themselves in so much that they absolutely do not look at, uh, uh, solutions and remedies and so forth. And so, historically, I could go over so many things that would point in this direction, but just let me say that the ability to overcome the system as it presently is, so that we could actually do commerce on the level that the ETs do that, is within our grasp. And if you do not box yourself in to where you can't see and think those things, then you'll never discover that, obviously. But in any event, I've seen it, others have seen it, and so we have been working to develop the technology to liberate people so they can have that view also. Like I say, debt is a 4-letter word, and so we ought not use that word. But we have discovered that, and within the system, that was set up, that the I don't know, the patriot community or the naysayers and so forth, the remedy is there. The remedy is there, and we have discovered it, and we're developing the technology so that we can explain that to others as well.
Okay, and yes, and what is that remedy?
Well, it goes in two directions. The best remedy is set off of debt. The second level, or the second, is discharge of debt. The discharge of debt does not remove the debt; it just puts it off into the future. But the set off is possible. Now, it goes down to the concept of the difference between an open and a closed account. Now, let me do a little bit of experiment with you, just for fun here. I want for you to start counting, and I want you to count to 10.
Out loud, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I'm not trying to
1,
trick you.
2, 3,
Stop,
4.
stop. Start again.
1, 2, 3,
Okay,
4.
far enough. Now, let me ask you this question, and you deliberate upon this. Why did you start with 1 instead of 0?
Force of habit, because as a journalist, no.
Yeah,
As a
that's right.
journalist, they ask me to count to 10 all the time when I go on TV, and I start at 1, and it's just force of habit. I haven't thought about it. So there you go, force of habit. I'm
Well,
thinking.
we're trained. We're trained to start with 1. Now, if we started with 0, that would be proper.
Okay.
In school, they teach us that 0 is a placeholder. Well, that's incorrect. Properly understood, 0 and infinity are the same value.
Okay.
Now, certainly at this point in our scientific history, the scientists and physicists are starting to work with what they call zero field theory. So, in order to understand that concept, you certainly cannot start counting at one or any other derivative of zero. You have to start with the concept of zero itself. And then once you understand the zero concept, then infinity starts to make a little bit of sense. And so in our economics, then when we start to talk about the value of our economies, our money and our currencies and so forth, you have to realize that a $1 bill, as it were, is a derivative. And I'll often ask people, which has the greatest value, a $1 bill or a $5 bill? And the answer is the $1 bill, because it's closer to unity. All these derivatives and everything, and the way we've been taught to think, take us off on a wild goose chase. And so the remedy that is provided by the technology of set off is to reduce liability to zero. And when you get to that zero balance, then you have arrived at unity. Does that make any sense?
No. No, I mean,
Okay.
maybe it does to one of our viewers, but to
Problem.
me, uh, it does, and I make no apology. If I had it in text and I studied it for a while, perhaps I
Mm-hmm.
would make a breakthrough. I'm not your best student, I guess, but it does, it just doesn't. It I'm I I'm sorry.
Okay, well, maybe I could give you another concrete example.
Okay.
When we were in school in mathematics and arithmetic and so forth, they taught us grafting. And they showed us the x-axis and they showed us the y-axis, and where the
Okay.
x and y intersect, what is that value? Zero.
Zero. Right.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Now, if you start from zero and go in either direction on the x-axis, which is the horizontal line which represents time, then either go +1, +2, +3, or any other direction. It might go -1, -2, -3. It makes no difference, because
Right.
as you get away from zero, then you're starting into derivatives where they're in a positive or negative direction. Now, as you go through time, and you decide that I'm uh, dissatisfied with how this thing is going, and so I would like to stop time, how would you do that? At that point that you decided that you wanted to go to zero again, then you would simply go vertical along that y-axis. And so by going vertically in the grafting system, you have established a new zero point. And so in our economics and our day-to-day business and all these kind of things that we do, as we see, time is simply a measurement that was created for commerce. That's all it's for.
Well,
And so when
well, there, yes, but comma and there is another sense in which we exist. We only exist because there is time. Because Earthling humans currently, we exist in a time space hologram, or a time space dimension, or the third
correct.
density of time space, so that if time were abolished, we would cease to exist as such. We are having
Maybe.
this because time is a dimension. So there are all of these different levels of meaning of time, and perhaps the difficulty that we're having, is that you're asking questions at this level, and I'm thinking at this level. I just finished writing and publishing a book called The Dimensional Ecology of the Omniverse, which begins to explain how dimensions such as time and light and space interact. Whereas you're speaking about functional dimensions such as time in commerce, which I think is, a 60-day note, a 90-day note. Uh, so we're really talking at different functional levels of reality. So maybe that's why I'm not doing too good on your tests.
Well, I was just trying to reduce the thought process of zero, back to the graphing techniques that
Yeah.
we learned when we were in school and so forth. And my comment was related to the concept of set off on the basis that in commerce, any party that becomes enlightened or whatever and decided that they no longer wanted to participate in the world of derivatives, if they simply reduce the account to zero, they go vertical and time stops in commerce in regards to that transaction or in regards to that account and so forth. So that's what I was trying to relate it to. Is
Okay. Okay. I can
that helpful?
understand that. I, I, now, in your terminology, then, for example, a Federal Reserve note of $1 is a derivative. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Now, first off, Federal Reserve notes are not notes. They're perpetual annuity bonds. They're there to guarantee the notes of the citizens, and that would take a lot of explanation. And there's been a lot of misunderstanding about Federal Reserve notes themselves. And so the Federal Reserve note, certainly, it's not the note itself that's caused the problem, it's the fact that we're using them. A lot of people do not use Federal Reserve notes, they use other forms of currency. For instance, a lot of people deal in postal money orders, certified bank checks, and all manner of things like that. None of those, of course, are interest bearing. It's the interest on the FRNs that causes us our problems. But again, the Federal Reserve note is not a note. And under negotiable instrument law, there's only two kinds of instruments. There's notes and there's drafts. The Federal Reserve note is neither, although we use it as pocket change,
Oh,
unfortunately.
okay. Okay. Now, may I now introduce? I'm just thinking. I sometime back I proposed 7 steps to transform the world economy, and these are policy steps.
Okay.
And I want to see how your approach
Okay.
can somehow interlock with the approach that I'm looking at, because I'm trying to
Okay.
understand what your remedy is. Could you
Mm-hmm.
summarize in a few sentences what the approach of your remedy is? Are you redefining money? Are you coming out with a new form of money? Are you abolishing money? What is the remedy to the current system which disenfranchises most of humanity from wealth?
Okay. Let me sum it up with this statement. I'm kind of taking notes here as we go to make sure I don't miss some of these things. The ultimate remedy, again going back to zero field theory, is return of interest to principal and surety. That's how we resolve the problems. That is the remedy that makes the thing go to zero or back to the zero field. So return of interest, or in the case of zero field theory, return of momentum back to source. Or in commerce, we say return of interest to principal and surety. And so that's how we resolve the problem with the derivatives and the liabilities that are created.
So, practically speaking, how exactly would the current system change in your view?
Actually, it wouldn't. It would not change. The system was set up properly back in the 1920s. I think in like 1928, they came out with what was known as the plan of the experts. And had that plan been successfully implemented and followed properly, we would not have the problems we have here. However, that plan was hijacked and then taken in and then corrupted. And so that's what we're having to deal with now is a system which was created, which would answer these questions, but it has been corrupted to the extent that we have turned over the remedy to middlemen.
Okay.
And the middlemen that we're using are the ones who are preventing the return of interest to principal and surety. For instance, a lot of people don't know. I mean, look at the IRS 1040 form. They call it a return, but that is an incomplete title. The true title of that particular document is Return of Interest to Principal and Surety.
Okay.
And people
Okay.
are filling them out wrong. But I
Okay.
don't want to get into the IRS stuff.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm beginning to understand you. Okay. Now let me present this program, which I think
Okay.
antecedes uh, the system of the experts. Okay.
Okay. I'll take notes.
Okay. Step
Go ahead.
one. In fact, I'll just put the link in your chat, and we'll put this
Okay.
in the also in the description of the video so people can follow. And
Sure. Okay.
you can just click on that and it'll come right up.
I'm afraid it might erase me off the screen. Will it do
Oh,
that?
no. Well then don't. I'll just read it. Step number one is
Okay.
to
Okay.
abolish the Federal Reserve Bank.
We've done that.
Okay, because that's a private bank. It's not a public central bank. And
Yeah.
under
If you're
that,
okay, go ahead.
yeah, because the Constitution gives the U.S. government the power to issue its own currency. And with the Federal Reserve Bank, which is functionally owned by one family, well, a group of families led by the Rothschilds, they are merely every time that the U.S. government wants to create money, it's got to borrow it from the Rothschilds, basically. It's just
Sure. I
yeah,
understand.
yeah, okay. Step two is create a U.S. central bank as a public utility. In other words, what we're doing is we're reinventing money in the same way as gas, electricity, or water.
Sure.
It's a public utility. And
Correct.
that means that everybody's entitled to it.
Sure.
And so that you have, just because you're born, you're entitled to a certain modicum of money or gas, water, and electricity. And if you want to create a business, see, this is a creativity-based economy. So if you have a creative idea, you just go to the public utility and say, I want so much more money so I can start this particular creative concept. And since we're a planet of money that has dealt with money over the last 280,000 years, and we're still in the third density, what we're doing is that we're trying to edge up our planet more into the fourth density, and we're pushing the envelope on what money is, and we're making a public utility of it. And
Okay.
yeah, and now the fourth step is that
Third step.
oh yeah, third step, sorry, is
Okay.
that we end the power of private banks, credit companies, uh, uh, the power of private companies, credit companies to create debt and fractional reserve lending. In other words, debt
Okay.
disappears out of the equation. Step four is the U.S. central bank is a public utility providing public money, credit and banking for the population, i.e., money is not private property of the elite anymore. It's a function for growth and creative growth of the population. And step 5 is that the U.S. government and all governments refuse to honor any debt obligations brought about by the policies of the Federal Reserve, because it came about in 1913 as a result of legislative fraud, and it has governed as a result of fraud. And step 6 is the forgiveness. We have a one-time for forgiveness of all public and private debt worldwide, because we're moving out of the debt system, which was set up by the manipulatory extraterrestrials starting, to a 250,000 years ago with their system, and we're just leaving that whole system behind. So these are steps. They can be taken. Step 7 is a financial war crimes tribunal. I say that as a former war crimes judge, because there are individuals who just sat back and fiddled while Rome burned and did it knowingly, and this rose to the level of genocide and other legal norms. And, they just got away with genocide and murder. So they've got to face the consequences. So that's a package. Those 7 steps, they don't have to take place, one after the other. They can take place in parallel. But that's a program for getting us out of this into the future. Now, I must admit that I don't understand your terminology, but I'm sure it fits in with this plan. Would you say, or would you say not?
Some parts of it. Probably if I had an opportunity to spend 4 or 5 hours talking to you, you might revise some elements of that.
Yeah, sure. This is a draft. This is just the back of the envelope draft.
Sure. Uh-huh.
And maybe we could have a follow-on program, maybe sometime down the road after we mutually have a chance to both study this, to talk to each other, to talk to some of your extraterrestrial friends. And
I don't think they would talk about it too much. But
anyway.
what might be very good is at some future time that when we have another opportunity for an interview, that we bring Keith Scott into the conversation.
Okay, tell me more about Keith Scott.
Okay, I'll just give you a short review. Keith is an Australian.
I'm sorry, you're
before he came to this.
Yeah, could
Australian.
Yeah. Could you say it again? Because you kind of broke up.
Okay, Keith Scott is an Australian, and the first time I met him was in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. We had gone there to meet with Dr. Ray C. Dam of the Office of International Treasury Control. Now, this is a key thing. In any event, Keith had labored in that position with Dr. Dam for about 15 years when I first met him. Now, I won't go into all the circumstances with the OITC, but eventually, because of the circumstances, Keith was appointed as the settler on the Sukarno Trust. And the Sukarno Trust is the trust that holds the accounts for all of the gold that underwrites the world's currency is accounted for. So, in that position as settler for the Sukarno Trust, Keith has power of attorney to act on its behalf. Now, this plays right in with some of your positions on your 7 points here in regards to the Federal Reserve. In this light, is that in the spring of 2012, I had joined up with Keith in let's see, against the Federal Reserve banks, which we did. Now, the key point there is that the Federal Reserve banks were due to recharter. Internet went down for some reason. Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. Welcome back. So, could we pick up there from 2012? I think was where your internet
Okay.
went out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I had gone to spend time with Keith Scott in Indonesia, the purpose of which had to do with other events and so forth. But one of the things that we undertook to do at that point was to create from the private side. This is important to understand for people. From the private side, he, as settler on the Sukarno Trust, created commercial liens against all 12 of the Federal Reserve banks, which were due to recharter as of 1 January 2013. And in consequence of that, they were not able to recharter. And so the Federal Reserve banks themselves were the function of the Federal Reserve banks at that time, then reverted to the United States Treasury, which was exactly where we wanted them.
I see.
In conjunction with those, Keith also created other commercials against various European and Asians which had been illegally trading on the collateral, again, which were held, those accounts were held in the Sukarno Trust. So in consequence, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, I just want to be very, very precise here. But yet we have Chairperson Yellen, Janet Yellen, going forward today as though she has a Federal Reserve that's been rechartered. Could you explain that, please?
Well, how many FRNs did they print today?
By FRN, you mean Federal Reserve notes.
Yeah, we put an end to that. Now, to save face
yeah,
or whatever.
But could you? I know that you're very familiar with the subject matter, but those of us who aren't familiar with it, what did you mean by how many FRNs do they print today? You mean that? Yeah. Could you just?
Well, it goes to this concept.
Spell it out for us.
Cheap.
Sorry?
Yeah, talk is cheap. So that was the innuendo I made by saying how many FRNs did they print today? You said she came out and said things today. So my reply to you was how many FRNs did they print today? And the answer is they didn't.
So that what you're saying is that the Federal Reserve as of 1 January 2013 could not recharter, so that since that time there have been no Federal Reserve notes printed?
Well, not by the Federal Reserve banks. I think the CIA prints a bunch of them, but aside from that, no.
The CIA?
CIA prints all kinds of money.
So it's the CIA that is printing this money?
Could be. I don't know, but I'm just telling you. I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
I don't want to go off on that rabbit trail there. But what I'm saying is the net effect of the commercial liens that were put in place against the Federal Reserve banks had the net effect of the function of the Federal Reserve being melded into the United States Treasury.
Okay, so I get it. So what you're saying, you just excuse me a second.
Sure.
What you're saying is that as of 1 January 2013, the current, quote, institution that we know as the Federal Reserve is actually a rogue institution that has no standing. Is that what you're saying?
It's not a rogue. It's been melded into the United States Treasury.
Into the U.S. Treasury, right?
Correct.
But
it's under the control of the United States Treasury.
Yeah, but
So,
but you have a whole staff that's in the reality that they think that, and you have all these banks that still think they are the Federal Reserve. So what are they?
Well, like I say, the third dimension is a hologram, is it not?
I see. So by its terms, what you're saying is that that institution is of no legal effect. It's a sham institution. Okay, good. I'm just trying to pin you down so that we have some concrete answers here. Okay, good. Now, a second question.
Okay.
There are other people who say that, in fact, that gold is controlled by a trust that is under the control of the indigenous tribes elders of Indonesia. How does that compare with a Sukarno trust? Could you give a comparison there? Is it different gold?
Yes.
Is it the same gold?
Same gold. That if you go back to the plan of the experts back in, I think it was actually brought out in 1928, it called for a unification of the gold on the planet, and you can go back and study all the history of that. But the purpose of it, the purpose of uniting the gold was that so all countries would have equal access to the use of it. The intent was to stop war. They didn't do a very good job of that, but that was the intent of the collecting up of the gold and so forth. Now, the gold is just where it's at. I mean, it's buried in the ground, it's involved, it's all over the place, but the key to it is the accounts that of the Sukarno Trust, because the power is not in the gold, the power is in the accounts.
In the accounts.
So, correct. Because, again, when you start dealing with what you're calling fiat currency and so forth, it's not about the gold, because you can't redeem any currency in gold on the planet at this point. But the key to it is the power is in the accounts themselves and not in metal.
Okay, now, let me ask you a third detailed question. This is just to clarify in my own mind.
Okay.
There was a book that came out about 10 years ago called Yamashita's Gold. Yamashita was a general, a Japanese general in the Second World War.
Yeah.
And this had to do with the gold that was plundered by Japan from all of China in the Second World War and then buried in the Philippines.
It's on AT&T, so.
Well, who knows? Okay, let me get this question in quick.
Yeah, about Yamashita.
Yeah, this goes back to Yamashita's Gold, and this is a book that came out about 10 years ago. Yamashita was a Japanese general in World War II, and this was the gold that was plundered by Japan from China.
Yes.
In World War II, an enormous stash of gold that then was buried in the Philippines. What is the relationship of Yamashita's gold to the gold in Indonesia?
It's all accounted for in the Sukarno Trust. Every last ounce.
Okay, good. Now it's all clear. I.e., Yamashita's gold is part of the gold in the Sukarno Trust. Okay, good. Good, great. Okay, so please continue enlightening us.
Well, I think of the thing that started this discussion, you had made 7 points that you thought would, policy-wise, would enhance a return to, good commerce and so forth. And so I was referring to some of the things that we had done. That once that comes to your attention, there are probably some revisions or even additions that you might want to make, to your policy statements here.
Yeah.
The there's one particular thing, and you had spoken in regards to forgiveness of debt.
Yeah.
Now that's a comment that comes up in regards to Nasara.
Oh, right.
But see, the problem with what we call forgiveness in itself implies discharge, and what we're really looking for is reducing the debt to zero. And so, the concept of Nasara, along with the ancient custom of Jubilee and all those kind of things, is well understood. But you have to understand that Jubilee, forgiveness of debt, and so forth, is a Levitical principle as applied in the Old Testament, and does not answer to the conditions that were created when the surety appeared on the planet in the form of the man that's referred to as Jesus. And so
Oh,
probably a little bit better than forgiveness, I think I would move toward a set off to reduce the accounts to zero, so that we can return the momentum back to the zero field theory in physics, or simply create closed accounts in our commerce.
now could you speak about, because for me that was kind of an interesting zigzag there. What does Jesus have to do with this with debt,
Well,
with exoeconomics?
it's in the Judeo-Christian system, and I refer to it as an example. In their system, in the Levitical system, they had referred to discharge of debt using animals and all that kind of stuff, but it only created a discharge. So the discharge again of debt, if you look at the definition, discharge of debt, it does not remove the debt. It simply puts off the remedy into the future. So in that system, the principle or the surety that would create the set off of those debts under the Levitical system came under another priesthood. And the agent or the principal of that priesthood was the man that they referred to as Jesus of Nazareth. So I'm not preaching Christianity here. I'm simply referring to the system that they used to reduce their debt accounts to zero. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Well, I would have to. I'm going to review the tape. I know that it's going to take me a long time to follow this language because I'm still following a linear system, I guess. Um, well, are there any major areas? Let's consider this uh, stage one, and that we're all going to have this, and then we'll have a stage two um, interview with Keith Scott.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and because I think he could bring a lot more to the table, because this is about a a world financial and currency transformation. Is that what the goal here is, and an implementation of sort of taking this criminal elite, namely the people who have appropriated in the name of the of very dark dimensional forces, all the wealth of the planet, or a great deal of it. That is, what are your goals?
Basically, my goal as an educator is to bring some of these things to people's attention. What we've done to facilitate understanding is to basically do a dissection in as much as we have taken and created, or what we refer to as public versus private. The private being the real world, the public being the fictional world. And then when you start to talk about money, the concepts of it and so forth, you have to know the difference between the public and private. Now, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to teach and implement on the public side is to go into a total non-cash situation. And that remedy, as I mentioned, is already provided for in the system that we're operating with. And so, once people can conceptualize of a duality in that respect. Now, let me say that once you have separated them apart and studied them for what they are, then you have to put them back together for unification. But for the study purposes only, you have to understand the difference between private versus public. For instance,
I just got to interrupt.
Sure.
A lot of people say non-cash, and the first place they go is chipped. That you're going to be. We had the former head of DARPA, who's now with Google, and she was up there showing off her digital tattoo, and so is that what you're talking about? A non-cash economy?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
absolutely not. What we're trying to get to is to the same point that the ETs are operating at, is no money at all, cash or non-cash.
Okay,
it's not needed. It never is needed.
Okay, so conceptually, how does that operate?
Give me a. I mean, I'm not. That's a pretty open question.
Yeah. Well,
Give me a particular.
Okay, so I'm on planet Earth, or I'm on planet, ABC, and how there is no money, so how does it operate that goods and services get exchanged and made?
Well, I would believe that a study of the way things are done within the hollow earth would be very enlightening. They don't use money either.
Okay.
And so, we've had a few examples of that. Some information that has come forward. We've had a few of them come out and explain things. But in essence, the exterior of the planet will have to be changed in order to facilitate that. Now, there is some hope or some promise from the ETs of free energy devices, food replicators, et cetera, which would go a long way in that direction. But in essence, the surface, the land that's on the earth will have to shift so that the inhabitable area of the planet is in a tropic or subtropic condition in order to facilitate this. And so, I think that's quite possible. I think the continents can float back, to where they were originally, et cetera. But for an example, it might be good to look at how things are handled inside the hollow earth.
Yeah. Do you have any specifics, like a specific story that one of the people from Hollow Earth, an anecdote that you recall that a Hollow Earth person may have said?
Well, we could go a long ways into this. Perhaps, I have a book that I've got from somewhere. I'll be happy to send to you. But it was description. It was a description of the retreat of the Germans into the hollow earth, which actually began, I think, in the 1500s. And so some Germans apparently had gone to Brazil, had found their way, through various ways, and had ended up among the people who were already living within the hollow earth. And so they established a community there. They went back and forth, so forth. And then the Germans, and many of them Nazis,
So
actually
they,
retreat.
yeah, but you said starting in the 1500s.
Yeah, they've been there
So,
for a long time.
oh, okay.
Now they found people already there. Certainly, this one group they found, I forgot their name. I think they were called Bods, in the area they inhabited close to the southern regions was called Bodland. And so anyway, they were introduced to these people. They showed them their society, how they did things. And so these Germanic people from the 1500s adopted those ways, and they lived that society. Now, later on,
I've actually been there.
really,
It's a town called Blumenau in southern Brazil, and I've been to the Festival da Cerveja in
oh,
Blumenau, and you think that you're in Germany because
oh yeah,
everybody's German. They're all speaking German,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like it's German. It's a total German, and it's in southern Brazil.
yes, those people go in and out on a constant basis.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because I was coming up on a trip from Montevideo to Rio. We were headed for the carnival. This is back in the late 60s. And we wandered into Blumenau, and we had no idea that it existed. And suddenly we wandered into this like Oktoberfest. And
Yeah,
it's just like wandering into a completely German environment in the middle of Brazil. Isn't that
yeah.
interesting?
I'm not sure that they're on the actual spot where the opening is.
No, no, no.
They
Yeah,
may
no,
be.
sure.
And when you go again, ask them to take you inside of the Earth.
Yeah.
At this point in the history, they have developed very good technology, very good transportation, and they can get you to the surface of the inner Earth probably just in a few minutes.
That is amazing. I had no concept back then that we were dealing with inner Earth people or people who
Uh,
had been to inner Earth.
Yeah, yeah. They carry on a constant communication. Many of those from the inside actually come out and attend universities and training and so forth in various universities, and then they go back. I mean, for whatever reason, I don't know, but that's their preference. So they go back. They go in and out all the time. And this fellow I was telling you about at the start of the interview, this Pleiadian, he's actually flown into the Hollow Earth on 2 occasions. And I asked him flat out, I said, was it in a fixed wing aircraft or a round wing aircraft? And he said it was in fixed wing.
Hmm.
And I said, and I finally pinned him down. He did not go in through the northern opening. He went in through the opening in Iceland.
Huh.
And so he told me some interesting things. A lot of stuff he kept holding back, and so by innuendo I could determine certain things about his 2 trips, and so forth. But in any event, there's a fella that's actually he lives down in Pahrump, Nevada. Colonel Billy Woodard,
Mm-hmm.
and he was born inside the Hollow Earth. He and his sister. And they were brought to the surface for various purposes, and so you can read his story, and I think he broadcast on the various programs and whatnot. But also, one of my friends in England, actually she's Irish, and she's an incarnate fairy, and actually she is the queen of the fairies. But in any event, she told me a while back that a very tall individual came into her front room, and she said, luckily I have 10-foot high ceilings where I'm living, and her description of that individual indicated to me that he was from inside the Hollow Earth. They're typically 12, 14 foot tall and so forth in there. Some of them, not all, but some of them are. And so I asked her, pointedly, I said, was this a physical appearance or was it an apparition? She said, no, it was physical. I touched him, we talked, and he said that he had been sent to be her guardian. So we have a lot of interesting things going on just all over the place.
Yeah, well, this fits in with a great deal of knowledge among knowledgeable elders in the surface Earth spiritual community who say that
Yes,
first the contact will be with Agartha. That's
correct.
a,
Uh-huh.
another name for the inner Earth, and certainly if they have an exoeconomics that does not use money, then this would be there, having an exchange, having them to be able to mentor the surface Earth would be tremendous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we need to do to prepare for that is to get rid of our old paradigm way of thinking
Hmm.
and look for the opportunity to at least attempt or to work into the cashless society concept.
Right.
And on the public side, that is entirely possible. And we've developed the technology to do that in the
Okay.
public.
Yeah. Now, could you describe that briefly by any
Sure.
chance?
Uh-huh. You have to understand that since the gold was taken out of use as far as currency back in 1933 and so forth, the remedy for that was provided was discharge of debt by United States citizens. Now it has gotten fouled up more recently with the Trading with the Enemy Act and all that stuff, and I won't go into all that. But in any event, the remedy is still available if you understand it and can use it. And so what we've been trying to educate people with is the ability to use the remedy. And there's a certain amount of pushback that comes about by the intermediate bandits, so forth, and so we have to sometimes fight through some of those problems. But by and large, we do have that remedy available to us, and so we use it in the public. Now, on the private side, we're not talking about the use of fiat currencies and all those other kind of things. Wow, it would take me probably 3 or 4 hours even to develop the thought process behind all that. So I'll just make this statement that the remedy is available and can be utilized upon the education.
Okay. Well, look, this has been for me, and I'm sure for many of our listeners, kind of a paradigm expanding session,
Yeah.
especially bringing back. We've done a number of programs on Agartha, but we haven't touched on that for a while. So I'm very grateful to you for bringing that area of knowledge in and that area of interaction. And so I'm going to look forward to the next session where we can bring in
Sure.
Keith Scott and really have an outline and a design to the program. And we want to thank you for your patience in kind of jumping into this program, which was sort of which was kind of impromptu, and it was like driving in the dark. So at least for me. So do you have any parting thoughts or words that you'd
Well,
like to
just
leave our viewers with?
as you say, we sort of jumped into this, but at the very least, I hope that I've given a few concepts and ideas that, upon investigation, might lead people to pursue and to learn a little bit more. Like I say, the third dimension is a hologram, and you can create your hologram in any way that you want if you understand the principles of creation. So I think people are well served to do a little bit more study.
Great, great. And you had mentioned about a book on Agartha, and if you could send those references,
Yeah, if
that
you want to put your email address
oh,
in
good,
the
sure,
text box, then I have quite a few. It's not particularly about Agartha. You understand that
yeah,
Agartha is only one of the places
sure.
inside.
I
For
see.
instance, the Vikings up around the northern interest
Yeah,
have a whole society situation there, and many of the ones who do come out in the ambassador or teaching precept actually come in through Iceland
I
and
see.
are upon the planet with Icelandic passports.
Fascinating. Okay,
Yeah, it
well,
is
look,
kind of fun.
I really I and our listeners look forward to our next meeting.
Oh,
So
sure.
until then, have a safe journey,
Okay, well, thank you very much.
and thank you.